I stood in front of the mirror inside the tiny bathroom of the Lake Union Hotel, smoothing my hair one last time before heading into the ballroom. This year's Christmas party was fancier than usual, but that didn't make me any less nervous. I had dipped into the last bit of my credit line just to buy a simple black dress, polished enough to look appropriate, plain enough not to draw attention. Next month's rent had just gone up by nearly $200. My old sedan was still sitting in the garage because it needed new brakes, and my son needed a thicker winter coat to survive Seattle's cold. It felt like everything was piling up at once. My name is Elena Reyes, 34, a single mom and a project coordinator at Northbridge Analytics. I have been here almost 6 years. I am not the star of the department, but I work hard, I take responsibility, and I keep things moving on time. Still, my salary barely keeps up with the cost of living in this city. And tonight, standing in a room full of glass, warm gold lights, and a lake view so perfect it felt unreal, I could not shake the feeling that I did not belong here. When I walked in, the scene made me inhale sharply. Tables set to perfection, crisp white linens, crystal glasses catch every shimmer of light. From the balcony, you could see Christmas lit boats drifting across the water. My coworkers gathered in clusters, talking, laughing, and clinking glasses. The young marketing team buzzed the way they always did. The mid-level managers were polishing their images for the executives. Everything looked flawless. I found my usual quiet spot near the back. I have never liked parties. I liked these forced smiles even less, where every word needed to be filtered before leaving your mouth. I had taken a single sip of wine when I saw Avery Sloan step onto the stage. Avery, the chief executive officer. The kind of woman who could silence an entire room just by walking in. That unreadable half smile, half measuring look. Blonde hair pulled back, a perfectly tailored suit, eyes sharpened by years of high stakes decisions. I did not like her, but even I had to admit she carried a presence people respected. Lately, though, she looked more strained than usual. Rumor had it that revenue had dipped this year, and the board was pressing her hard. Avery began her speech. Her voice had that practiced smoothness that only comes from rehearsing a dozen times. She talked about the company's accomplishments, the challenges, and the people who made it possible. I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to bills and deadlines. 10 minutes passed. Everything felt predictable until she paused and scanned the seats below. Her gaze landed exactly where I was sitting. I froze. There was no way she was looking at me. I lowered my eyes to my wine, but I still felt it, that cold, deliberate stare. Then, as if she wanted to pull the entire room toward me, Avery raised her glass and spoke loudly enough for every echo to travel. Elena, how do you like your $8,000 Christmas bonus? The ballroom went still. Then came the wave of reactions. Dozens of eyes are turning, a few gasps, a few impressed looks. Someone whispered that I had gotten 8,000 this year. My whole body tightened. My heart pounded hard enough that I could hear it inside my ears. My throat felt dry and stiff. $8,000. I had not received a single cent. No email, no deposit, nothing. For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard her, but the way everyone stared, curious and waiting, told me she was not joking. Avery smiled with the confidence of someone who thought she had just shown off her generosity to the entire company. I stood, my legs shaking. My voice came out so soft I almost missed it myself. I did not receive anything. The room erupted into whispers, raised brows, confused glances. The host beside Avery froze mid-gesture. But what caught my eye was Megan Clark, our Director of Human Resources. She stood beside the executive table. When she heard my answer, her face went rigid. Her eyes widened briefly before she forced a stiff smile. Her glass stalled halfway to her lips. That was not the reaction of someone surprised I had not been paid. It was the reaction of someone terrified that the truth had surfaced. A cold shiver spread across my back. Megan was not shocked about the missing bonus. She was shocked that it had been revealed publicly. And in that moment, I knew something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And far from small. Avery scrambled to redirect the atmosphere, pushing the party back toward cheerfulness, but the energy had shifted. I felt eyes trailing me for the rest of the night, as if I were the one who had ruined the evening. My hands trembled every time I lifted my glass. I tried to smile, but something icy kept tightening inside my chest. I left early, stepping onto the hotel terrace. The wind off the lake was so cold it stung my eyes. Behind me, the warm lights and music faded under the winter air, and I felt it, sharp and unmistakable. Something crooked had just cracked open, and without meaning to, I had touched it. I arrived at my small apartment in North Seattle close to 10 p.m. Snow dusted the sidewalks, and the cold wind cut through my coat, making me shiver. The apartment was dark, lit only by the kitchen lamp, casting a pale glow on the gray walls. My son had been asleep for hours. I hung my coat, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. I did not intend to check email or work, but the worry that had clung to me all evening would not let me sleep. I logged into the payroll account. The screen popped up immediately, along with the words that made me sit upright. Holiday bonus, paid SR, Delta pending, manual redirect override. I read each word again. Paid. The bonus had been issued. $8,000. The amount the CEO had mentioned in front of hundreds of people, yet I had never seen it in my account. I switched to the banking app. The balance was unchanged. No deposit, nothing pending. I scrolled through the transaction history. Nothing. A hot rush ran down my spine. I checked again, then once more. Nothing changed. I reopened the payroll page, zoomed in on the transaction code. SR Delta pending. Manual redirect override. I had never seen these symbols before. I was a project coordinator, not an accountant, but I had seen my pay enough to know this was abnormal. Manual redirect. I wondered how many people in the company had the authority to access this system. Not many. Certainly, only HR above Megan and the finance team. None of them had any reason to alter my data, let alone redirect my $8,000 bonus elsewhere. I held my breath for a few seconds, trying to calm myself. It could be a display error, an end-of-year system glitch, a mistake. But the feeling from the party was still there, as clear as metal hitting the floor. A sense that someone knew about my bonus just before it reached my account, and they did not want me to receive it. I captured the entire screen, saving each image. Then I wrote an email to HR. Hello, Megan. I just checked payroll and saw my bonus listed as paid, but no deposit has reached my bank account. Please check and confirm. I read it over a few times and clicked send. Immediately, exhaustion hit me, as if I had opened a door I was not ready to walk through. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, then returned to the laptop. Less than 5 minutes later, a new email appeared. Hello, Elena. The bank may be processing slowly. Year end usually has a 1 to 2 day delay. Please wait a little longer. I leaned back in my chair. The reply was so fast, I knew Megan had not checked anything. And the explanation was completely unreasonable. My paycheck always arrived on time. It had never been late. I reopened the banking app to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Everything was still blank. I turned off the screen, put my hands on the desk, and buried my face. Rent would be auto-deducted on Monday. If delayed even one day, I would be charged a late fee. I had been struggling for months. That $8,000 was not a lavish bonus. It was what would let me breathe after weeks of exhaustion. I tried to sleep, but at 3 a.m., I was still staring at the ceiling. Images from the party replayed. Avery's eyes when she asked that question. Megan freezing. The whispers of the others. Unease slowly built inside me, like water seeping into the wood floor. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than everyone else. I checked my account again. No change. I decided to ask a colleague in the accounting team responsible for internal reporting, someone I trusted somewhat. She flinched when I asked. I don't know either. I'm short almost 1,000 compared to the notification, but I don't dare question it. Year-end bonuses are sensitive. Raising issues is risky. Her words weighed on me. Apparently, it wasn't just me. And everyone seemed to understand it was best not to touch the bonus issue. All morning, I couldn't focus. I kept staring at SR Delta pending and the words manual redirect like a dark puzzle. I needed someone who understood the system, someone who could explain the hidden symbols. That evening, after feeding my son, I messaged Liam. You free for a bit? I need to check something. Liam was an IT engineer at the company, one of the few I trusted completely. 3 years of working together, staying up late, fixing issues, sharing stories we never told anyone else. He called immediately after I sent the screenshot. You pulled this from payroll? Yes. And you haven't received the bonus, right? Right. Liam was silent for a few seconds. I heard the tapping of keys, then his voice lowered, serious. Elena, manual redirect isn't a system error. This is only used when someone with direct admin rights edits the transaction routing. And very few people have that access. I swallowed. So someone did it intentionally? Not accidental. Redirects like this require approval. Subordinates can't just do it. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. Every word Liam said was etched into my mind. He added, Elena, I don't know who did it, but this isn't a small matter. I went silent. The screen before me went dark. I saw my reflection, hollow, tired, afraid. That night, a thought slid through. My mind, first thin as smoke, then gradually sharp and clear. Someone had taken my bonus. Not a mistake, not a bank error. Someone is deliberately trying to keep me from receiving it, and they had the power to do it. After the conversation with Liam that night, my mind barely rested. I arrived at the office the next morning, earlier than usual. I knew I couldn't pretend nothing had happened, but I also didn't want to appear overly agitated. I walked into my workspace, turned on my computer, and tried to focus on a report in progress. Less than 10 minutes later, a notification popped up in my inbox. Megan Clark invites you to a quick meeting. Conference room 4. In 15 minutes, I stared at the message. I knew this meeting was coming, but I hadn't expected it to arrive so quickly. Conference room 4 was at the end of the hallway, the place HR typically sent employees for reprimands or clarifications. I stepped inside. Megan was already seated, her face unnaturally bright. The coffee cup in front of her still emitted steam as if she had just arrived seconds before me. But I knew she had prepared thoroughly for this conversation. Elena, please sit. I want to explain a bit about your bonus code. I pulled the chair, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Yes, I'm ready for the explanation. Megan smiled, her voice sweet in an over-the-top way. SR Delta is an internal program involving talent prioritization and year-end budget allocation. Sometimes there are temporary adjustments in the system. Don't worry too much adjustment. I repeated it in my mind. A perfect word to hide everything, but meaningless in reality. I looked directly into her eyes. I want to know why my bonus shows is redirected and why I was never informed of any program related to SR Delta. Her confident expression faltered briefly, but she quickly restored her practiced composure. I understood her frustration, but these were internal business matters. I thought she was too tense. Year-end was busy for everyone. Best to focus on your project. I sat quietly for a few seconds. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized clearly that Megan had no intention of answering. And her focus on your project was not advice. It was a warning. I stood. I am not worried, Megan. I just want to understand why my bonus was handled this way. I will keep asking until I get a concrete answer. Megan's smile visibly faded. She nodded politely, but her eyes were cold. I understood. She could leave. I stepped out of the meeting as if I had just entered a high-pressure room and exited through an emergency door. When the door closed behind me, my heart pounded so hard my hands shook slightly. I had not received an answer, but I had received an important message. They wanted me to stop. I returned to my desk. The air in the office felt thick. Everyone seemed to know I had just been called in. A few colleagues glanced at me, then quickly looked away. My direct manager, Jeff, walked by without stopping, as he normally would. No questions about project progress, no morning greeting. He passed as if I did not exist. An hour later, in the Monday morning team meeting, I noticed my name was missing from the list of key tasks for the next quarter. This had never happened before. I looked around, trying to find an explanation in everyone's eyes, but all I received was caution I had just been removed from major assignments. Gently, but unmistakably, that afternoon, when I opened the project folder to check old files, I realized some were missing. Files I was certain I had saved last week. I searched for them. Nothing. I checked the archive log. No trace. As if they had never existed. A cold feeling spread up my spine. I rested both hands on the keyboard for a long moment, trying to stop the growing anxiety. Someone had accessed my work account, and they deleted files related to projects I was responsible for. They did not just want me silent. They wanted me to look incompetent. I opened the small notebook I had started writing in the night before. I recorded every detail. The meeting with Megan, the statements, Jeff's attitude, the missing files. I felt like I was reconstructing a puzzle with pieces appearing where I least expected them. By evening, I arrived home. As I opened the door, my son ran out, his face brightening, but his eyes freezing when he saw my expression. "Are you okay, Mom? You look sad today." I stretched my lips into a smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Mom is just a little tired." He hugged me tightly before running into his room to do homework. I watched him, my mind heavy with worries far bigger than the $8,000 bonus. Next month's rent would increase. I had to fix his old laptop so he could submit his online test next week. The credit card was almost maxed out, and if the company was intentionally putting pressure on me, things could get worse. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. It felt like someone was watching my every move. I heard cars outside and flinched whenever light hit the window. I did not know what I was facing. I only knew that now I was no longer merely the person missing a bonus. I was the one who asked questions they did not want anyone to ask, and the walls around me were slowly closing in. I went to the office the next day feeling heavier than the night before. Everything happening there seemed designed to push me into a dead end. I couldn't rely on Megan, couldn't trust Jeff, and even the coworkers who used to be friendly had begun to keep their distance, as if I carried something contagious. I knew I couldn't take another step without something more solid in my hands. So that night, after my son had fallen asleep and the apartment went quiet, I called Liam. "I need your help with this, but if you feel unsafe, then—" Liam cut me off. "Elena, you don't need to say it. Just send me what you've got." We switched to a video call. The glow of the screen lit my dark room. Liam's face appeared, the light reflecting in his eyes. I sent him the screenshots, the SR Delta pending code, the manual redirect tag, and Megan's vague explanation. Liam's keyboard clattered at a steady pace, sounding like rainfall. Then he said, "I'll check the server logs. Not all of them, but a few sections I still have access to." I nodded, gripping the edge of my jacket even though the room wasn't cold. The first 5 minutes passed in silence. Then I saw Liam lean closer to his screen, frowning. "Elena, SR Delta isn't a new code from this year." I looked up. "Not from this year? Then what is it?" Liam kept scrolling through strings of small text I couldn't fully read. "The SR Delta Fund. It was created 4 years ago, before Avery became CEO. It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. 4 years. That meant this wasn't something Avery just came up with. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment response to revenue pressure. It had existed for years. A structure, not a mistake. "Who created it?" I asked, my voice dropping. "The previous executive board. The group of vice presidents, before they moved to another company," Liam said. "But there are signs Avery kept using it." My laptop suddenly felt cold beneath my hands. I pressed my palm to my forehead, trying to organize my thoughts. If the SR Delta Fund had existed for that long, then every CEO since would have known. So why had no one mentioned it? Why did it appear in no official records? Liam paused, then lowered his voice. "The fund is described as a special resource fund, an internal support pool. But the spending?" He turned his screen so I could see. Lines of data scrolled across. Retreat Palm Springs, Tiffany gifts for executives, internal summit expenses in Napa Valley, a large transaction labeled PR event special approval. None of it was related to mid-level or lower employees. Not a single entry hinted at talent prioritization. As I stared at those numbers, the color drained from my face. So many employees like me, stretching every paycheck, counting on year-end bonuses just to breathe again, while that fund paid for luxury watches and resort vacations. If those people knew this, what would they think? I thought only one thing. This was no accident. This was a system built to deceive. Liam spoke again, his voice tightening. Elena, I found a list of manual redirect transactions. It shows everyone whose bonuses were adjusted like yours. He scrolled down. I caught glimpses of familiar names, people I'd seen exhausted, disappointed for months without knowing why. Then he stopped. Wait. This one. The screen froze on a single line. I leaned back, eyes widening as I processed what I was seeing. My direct manager's name, Jeff. It felt like fire ignited beneath my feet. Jeff, the man who had mentored me in my first years, who once praised me for saving a project in its final week, who had, just days ago, avoided my eyes in the hallway. He was on the redirect list, which meant he knew, which meant he might be part of it. He could have been benefiting from this system the entire time. I thought he was just a loyal middle manager. His recent distance, his sudden removal of my name from project rosters, it all snapped into focus. He wasn't just uneasy because I'd started asking questions. He was afraid of what I might uncover. A shiver ran through me. Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut, pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But another part, stronger, sharper, felt the noose tightening. If I stayed quiet, it would close around my neck. Liam broke the silence. Elena, if they realize how deep you've gone, you're in real danger. Not the HR warning kind, the serious kind. I looked at Liam's worried face on the screen. You want me to stop? No, he shook his head. But you need to be very careful. This isn't one person acting out. This is a whole system protecting itself. I sat there listening to the soft hum of my computer fan, a moment suspended between fear and resolve. If I'd come this far, I couldn't turn back. For the first time since all this began, I felt it. The sense that I was standing before a massive, heavy door, and behind it were things I wasn't sure I wanted to see. But I knew I had to open it. That morning, the office felt different the moment I stepped in. Quick glances, conversations pausing as I passed, forced half smiles. I knew the rumor had spread. Or worse, someone wanted it to. I had just set my bag on the chair when a notification appeared on my screen. Elena Reyes, please report to conference room 2. The meeting starts in 5 minutes. Sender. Megan Clark, HR. I froze for a few seconds. Conference room 2 was different from 4. 4 was for light exchanges. 2 was for administrative matters. Meetings where participants usually walked out heavy-hearted. I knew what awaited me. But when I opened the door, my chest still tightened. Megan sat at the head of the table, a thick file in front of her. To her right, Jeff, my direct manager, hands clasped, avoided my eyes. The room felt colder than the air conditioning. Megan gestured for me to sit. Elena, we need to discuss your recent conduct. Conduct. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. We have information that you intentionally accessed and collected internal data outside your scope of work. That constitutes a serious breach of company policy. I looked at Megan, keeping my voice calm. I was only checking my payroll. I accessed nothing else. Megan tilted her head, feigning sympathy. But it doesn't stop there. We have reason to believe you were digging into sensitive data related to the bonus system. My chest tightened. They knew I had asked Liam, or someone guessed, or they had been monitoring my access all along. Jeff remained silent, but I saw his hands tighten slightly at the word digging. Megan continued evenly. To avoid misunderstandings and unnecessary trouble, we have prepared a document for you to commit to not interfering with or investigating company internal activities further. This will protect both you and the company from unnecessary issues. She pushed the file toward me. The cover read, Employee Compliance Acknowledgement, Internal Inquiry Restriction. A gag order. I stared at it for a few seconds, then looked up. I will not sign this. Megan squinted. Her feigned kindness vanished. Elena, do you understand this is an opportunity to resolve this smoothly? Sign here. Continue your work as normal, and no further consequences will follow. I shook my head. I did nothing wrong. I will not sign. Megan leaned back, lips curling coldly. Then I must be blunt. In the next review, management may consider your lack of cooperation a negative factor. We regret if this affects your position. That was the clearest threat since this began. Jeff finally spoke, voice low but trembling. Elena, you should reconsider. We've worked together for a long time. This isn't a joke, I turned to him. If you think I did something wrong, say it. But don't ask me to sign this to cover up someone taking my bonus. Jeff's face went pale. Megan jumped in, trying to control the meeting. I decided this exchange was over. Elena, you may return to your desk. I stood, hands slightly shaking with anger and adrenaline. Walking out of the room, I knew I had crossed a line with no return. Less than 10 minutes after sitting back at my desk, my computer screen went black. Then a line appeared. System reset in progress. I blinked. No one had informed me of any update or reset. I moved the mouse. Useless. The computer restarted itself. When I returned to the desktop, 2 critical folders were gone. I opened the cloud archive. Empty. Not a single file. Even the attached emails I had saved were gone, as if they had never existed. Someone had wiped everything. I inhaled deeply, forcing calm. I wouldn't let them see me scared. I opened my bag and touched the small blue USB I carried daily. It contained a full backup of screenshots and notes from previous days. I had been smart to save everything the night before. That afternoon, as I stepped into the elevator, Jeff ran up, blocking the door before it closed. Elena, wait. I didn't want to talk, but there was something different in his eyes. Not cold, not distant like this morning, but tense, cautious. Jeff lowered his voice so only I could hear. Someone on the executive team is looking for a reason to fire you, not me. But I heard things. You need to be careful. Very careful. The elevator doors closed before I could ask more. I stood still, trembling in silence. This was no longer about a bonus, not just the threat in the meeting. This was a targeted purge. That night, I didn't go home immediately. I sat in my car, watching streetlights reflect off the windshield. I opened my phone and scrolled to the internal reporting contacts Northbridge Ethics and Compliance reporting line. I took a deep breath and hit call. An automated voice responded, then a staff member answered the hotline. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate, as if laying the first brick of a foundation I knew I would have to stand on in the days ahead. I want to report misconduct related to interference with internal bonus funds. After hanging up, my hands were still trembling, but for the first time since this started, I didn't feel cornered. I had officially struck back. That evening, when I drove out of the parking lot, it felt like I had triggered a chain reaction that no one could stop anymore, not even me. Calling the ethics hotline had made my hands shake, but it was also the first moment I felt I was finally moving in the right direction. I didn't know what would happen next, but silence was no longer an option. 3 days later, an unfamiliar email appeared in my inbox. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. We need to meet. Room 9B. 14 Hunchi. Come alone. Sender. Internal compliance. Restricted access. I looked around the office as if the walls could hear the pounding in my chest. Did anyone else know I'd received this? I closed my laptop, stepped into the hallway, and took the stairwell, where few people ever went. Room 9B was a small, overlooked meeting room on the 6th floor. When I entered, 2 people were already waiting, a middle-aged man wearing dark glasses and a badge that read compliance, and a younger woman holding a tablet. They invited me to sit. Their tone was polite, but not friendly. Elena, we received your report. We need you to provide all evidence related to the SR Delta transactions and the manual redirect logs. I took the USB drive from my bag. The man plugged it in, copying files silently. I recounted everything, from Megan's strange reaction at the Christmas party, to the meeting where they tried to make me sign the pledge, to the remote reset of my computer. They kept taking notes, occasionally asking about small details I never thought mattered. Then I gave them the server log Liam had pulled. I avoided mentioning his name, but the man simply smiled. We know who assisted you. He's safe. I exhaled in relief. 40 minutes later, the meeting was over. Before I left, the young woman spoke softly. "Thank you. You're not the only one who reported this. You're just the first with clear evidence." I froze for a moment. "Not the only one?" She nodded. "We've received several anonymous complaints this past week. You've started something bigger than you think." When I stepped out of the room, the loneliness I'd carried for weeks suddenly felt lighter. I wasn't alone anymore, but I hadn't even caught my breath before everything started moving in a direction I didn't expect. That afternoon, during lunch break, a message spread across the company chat. Everyone now knew an investigation was underway regarding bonus distribution procedures. Some whispered in the pantry. Others avoided my eyes as if I had brought a storm with me. By the end of the day, two groups had clearly formed. The first included mid-level managers and longtime employees, the ones who had seen the unfairness for years, but never had the chance to speak. One of them gently touched my arm as she stepped out of the elevator. "If you need a witness, I'll stand with you." The second group wasn't as kind. Megan passed me in the hallway without hiding her cold glare. CEO Avery stepped out of her corner office, her face sharper than usual. Jeff avoided my eyes completely. The office felt divided, like two armies quietly preparing for war. And somehow, I had become the battlefield. Around 5 that evening, Liam texted me. "Elle, we need to talk." I called him immediately. He spoke first. "Someone close to your team got to HR. They're saying you shared internal data with outsiders, that you leaked your own information to HR in exchange for a higher bonus." I froze. "Who?" Liam sighed. "Maria. She was caught copying your access logs and sending them to Megan. In return, she got an adjusted bonus." My stomach turned. Maria, the same woman I'd had lunch with every week, who once cried to me when her own bonus was cut last year. I'd hugged her, told her she deserved better. And now she had sold me out for a few $1,000s? A chill ran down my arms, not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. That night, rumors reached me that Avery and Megan were arguing upstairs. A manager who happened to walk by overheard Avery say, "If you can't control this, you're putting the entire company at legal risk." And Megan shot back, "I'm only following the system you put in place 3 years ago. Don't dump this all on me." I stood at the end of the hallway as someone whispered the story to me, and I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. I wasn't the only one in danger anymore. Their own walls were cracking. The next morning, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject: Official warning. Violation of Information Security Protocol. A written warning. It stated that I had accessed restricted data beyond my authorization level. I stared at the line, but the panic I expected never came. Instead, there was a strange calm in my chest. Because that afternoon, compliance called me again. The young woman's voice was firmer this time. "Elena, please stay calm. We believe the warning was an act of internal retaliation. This confirms our suspicion about the leadership team. You'll be under protection during the investigation." I sank into my chair, covering my mouth with my hand. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people trying to silence me were revealing themselves, and so were the ones trying to protect me. This was no longer a fight between me and them. It had become a war between two forces inside the company, and I was the spark that set it all on fire. That Wednesday morning, the office felt heavier than usual, thick with whispers that died the moment I walked past. The meeting notice appeared in my inbox like a blade, short, cold, and precise. Required attendance: Elena Reyes, Executive Room 3, 14 Huntois. Purpose: disciplinary discussion. Attendees: CEO Avery Sloan, HR Director Megan Clark. No explanation, no preface, just the next step in a process I already knew too well. Disciplinary. That word wasn't used lightly here. It was the line that came right before suspension, or termination. My heart beat fast, but not with panic. It was the steady rhythm of someone who knew she was walking into her final battle. At 2 o'clock sharp, I stood before the frosted glass door of Executive Room 3. Through the blurred panel, I could see two silhouettes waiting inside. I took one long breath and stepped in. Avery sat at the head of the table, every movement calculated, every inch radiating control. Megan sat opposite her, one manicured hand resting on a thick folder. There were no extra chairs, no third-party observers, just the three of us, sealed inside what looked like a prearranged interrogation. "Elena, have a seat," Avery said, her tone calm but devoid of warmth. I pulled the chair out. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt like a lock. Avery opened a file and slid it across the table toward me. "We have evidence that you accessed data outside your job scope, including system-generated logs. This is a serious violation of information security policy." I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. I already knew most of it was justification for a decision made long before I walked in. "Do I have the right to respond?" I asked. Avery nodded, though her eyes said it didn't matter. I opened my own folder, the one I'd spent weeks building. Screenshots, HR correspondence, proof of the remote reset, timestamp records, and the log Liam had extracted. I placed each item on the table, one by one, steady and deliberate. I didn't access anything unauthorized. I reviewed my own payroll and discovered a redirected transaction. I reported it to HR, but they dismissed it. My computer was reset remotely afterward. This is a copy I saved before the interference. The log proves the manual redirect wasn't a system error. Megan snapped forward instantly, her voice sharp as glass. "Where did you get this log?" "I don't believe Elena had access to that data. There's no guarantee this wasn't manufactured." She spat out that last word as if it were fact, not accusation. I looked straight at her. If I fabricated it, then why did HR pressure me to sign a non-disclosure form? Why was my system wiped the moment I refused? And why are multiple employees now submitting anonymous reports about the same issue? Megan opened her mouth to strike back, but Avery raised a hand. "That's enough." She flipped through several pages in her folder. Her eyes sharpened, the kind of look someone gives when they've already decided. "Given the situation, we have limited options. To protect the company from potential legal risk, I'm recommending we suspend you pending further investigation." Suspension. The word fell between us like a sentence. I knew that once it was signed, termination would only be a matter of paperwork. They were clearing the path to remove me legally, efficiently, quietly. My chest tightened, but I forced my face to stay calm. Avery uncapped her pen. She laid the document in front of me and began to sign at the top corner, the CEO's line. Then, 3 sharp knocks hit the door, firm enough to jolt all 3 of us. The door swung open. 2 people in black suits stepped in. I recognized them instantly. Compliance. One of them spoke before his second foot hit the carpet. "This meeting needs to stop immediately." Avery stood, her voice rising. "This is an internal disciplinary review. You have no authority to—" The man held up a paper stamped with a legal seal. "By order of the legal department, all actions related to SR Delta, including any disciplinary measures, are to be halted immediately. All documents, emails, and system logs are now under legal hold. No deletions, modifications, or personnel decisions regarding Elena Reyes are permitted until the investigation concludes." Megan jumped to her feet. "You can't interfere with HR protocol." The compliance officer looked at her, voice cold as steel. "We can, and we must. Preliminary evidence suggests one or more executives may have engaged in internal retaliation. This employee is protected under whistleblower provisions." Avery's grip on her pen tightened until her knuckles turned white. She looked ready to explode, but the legal order between us froze her in place. Legal hold. The phrase landed like a wall between them and me. The man turned to me. "Elena, you'll need to cooperate with us for the investigation. Everything you've provided will remain protected." I nodded once. Small, but heavy with everything I couldn't say: relief, fear, fury, and the faint, trembling realization that I'd just survived a blow meant to end me. Avery threw her pen onto the table, her voice flat as ice. "This meeting is over." I walked out of that room like someone who had just come back from the edge. My heart was still pounding, but not from fear anymore. It beat with one clear truth: they had been stopped before they could erase me. And from that moment on, I was no longer the one being hunted. After the interrupted disciplinary meeting, I walked into the office feeling like I had entered a completely different organization. The atmosphere shifted by the hour. as if someone were constantly adjusting the temperature and pressure inside the building. Whispers floated everywhere, from the elevator to the communal kitchen. Employees who had once joked and laughed were now silent and wary. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone felt it. A major investigation was quietly expanding. The next day, I received an email inviting me to a formal interview with the compliance department. The meeting room on the 8th floor was small and private, with only 2 investigators and a lawyer from legal. They turned on recording devices and asked me to recount everything from start to finish. I detailed every incident, discovering the SR Delta code, the forced pledge meeting, the remote reset of my computer, and the deleted files. When I handed over the USB containing my copies of the data, they received it with utmost seriousness. After I left the room, the investigation went into its deepest phase. Over the following weeks, the company's internal systems were combed through like a blade slicing clean. It informed Liam that servers had to be paused for hours due to the volume of logs extracted. Every access record for the past 4 years was analyzed. Every manual redirect was traced to the person who executed it. Every email and banking transaction was reviewed. Within 14 days, over 22 employees were summoned for interviews. Each walked out tense, some with red-rimmed eyes. Everyone knew the investigation involved SR Delta, but no one could gauge the severity. 3 weeks later, I was asked to return to the 8th floor for preliminary findings. The same 3 people were there, but the atmosphere was heavier. The man wearing glasses slid a folder toward me. Before opening it, he said bluntly, "Elena, the information you provided has allowed us to expand the investigation. The results are more complex than we anticipated." I swallowed, bracing for whatever was coming. He began. "Based on an analysis of server logs over 4 years, we have identified Megan Clark as the primary person directing most of the manual redirects. She used her high-level admin privileges to divert employee bonuses into the SR Delta Fund." I gripped the edge of the chair. Not surprisingly, but still a cold chill ran down my spine. But she was not the only one responsible. I looked up. Avery Sloan, as CEO, had approved special access to the SR Delta Fund for 3 consecutive years. Multiple misappropriated transactions were either signed off on by her or fell within her access privileges. My chest tightened. I had believed Avery was a firm but transparent leader. The truth weighed like stone. The young woman continued. "The SR Delta Fund was originally intended for managing personnel risk, but over 4 years, it had been misused for luxury retreats, expensive gifts, opaque PR expenses, and secret executive bonuses. The total amount misappropriated is nearly $3 million. $3 million. Far more than I expected." They paused, then handed me a list of over 40 employees whose bonuses were reduced or withheld without their knowledge. I recognized many names. Former colleagues who had told me their bonuses didn't make sense this year, those who had cried in the restroom after unfair evaluations. I leaned back to steady my breath. After compiling all findings, compliance submitted them to the board. The decision would be announced this afternoon, the man said. Later that afternoon, a company-wide email arrived. I opened it with trembling hands. Avery Sloan was immediately suspended and then terminated for serious financial mismanagement. Megan Clark's file was handed to the State Financial Investigation Authority. Several mid-level managers were suspended for approving illegal transactions. The SR Delta Fund was completely dissolved. Over 40 employees were reimbursed for their bonuses with interest. The company was mandated to conduct quarterly independent audits. No words softened the truth. Everything was written bluntly, coldly, with no avoidance. When the news hit, the office erupted, not with cheering, but with the sudden exposure of long-hidden cracks. People formed small groups, whispering about Megan being escorted out, Avery leaving through the back door without a word. Some cried at the thought of getting their bonuses back. Others hugged. Some stayed silent, unable to believe how quickly everything had collapsed. That evening, Liam brought a hot cup of coffee to my desk. He didn't speak at first, just sat and sighed. "You okay?" Liam asked. I looked out the window, watching the late Seattle sunlight filtering through thick clouds. I wasn't sure if I was okay, but one thing was certain. The truth was no longer buried. Northbridge would be shaken for a while. But this chaos was not a sign of failure. It was a system purging its toxins. And I realized I hadn't just reclaimed my lost bonus. I had reclaimed my voice in a system that had wanted me silent. I received the first payment on a bitterly cold morning at the end of December. An email from the bank arrived. My account had increased by nearly $20,000. The withheld bonus from this year, compensation for losses, and a special company grant after the SR Delta investigation. I sat still for a few seconds, staring at the numbers bouncing on the screen, unable to believe it was real. For months, I had lived under constant anxiety, rent unpaid, a broken car, mounting credit card debt. Now, the weight lifted as if a boulder had been removed from my chest. That afternoon, I picked up my son from school and took him to the nearby sporting goods store. His eyes lit up when he saw the navy blue lined coat he had wanted for months, one I had always postponed buying. For the first time in months, I didn't have to check the price and promise myself I'd return later. I just smiled and nodded. "Do you want to try this one?" He ran over and hugged me. His smile alone made all the effort worthwhile. That weekend, I brought the car to the garage. The mechanic looked at me in surprise. I had finally replaced the brakes and repaired the heating system that had been broken all autumn. I paid off part of my credit card and deposited the rest into savings. For the first time in years, my account was no longer in the red. That Christmas, my apartment truly felt alive. The two of us cooked a proper dinner: roasted chicken, hot soup, and homemade cookies. No fancy restaurants, just our tiny kitchen and my son's laughter. We played our favorite Christmas music and decorated the tree with old but clean ornaments, hung neatly. I watched him carefully place the star on top. A small moment, yet my eyes stung. I hadn't felt this peaceful in a long time. A few days later, while the company was still recovering from the investigation storm, I received a surprise email from a tech company in Bellevue. They knew about SR Delta, the news had spread through the industry, and wanted to meet me for a project lead position. The invitation was respectful, the kind of respect I hadn't seen in years, as if they recognized something in me that Northbridge had spent 4 years trying to obscure. The interview went quickly. They asked about my management experience, crisis handling skills, and how I coped with pressure. I answered honestly. No exaggeration, no embellishment. When I left the room, I wasn't sure if I'd get the job, but for the first time in a long while, I felt confident in myself. 3 days later, the official offer arrived. I was hired. Higher pay, better benefits, and a transparent environment. Nothing is more attractive than the respect it conveyed. On my last day at Northbridge, I walked into the building feeling strange. No more trembling, no more fear of being watched or sidelined. Colleagues stood as I passed. Some hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Elena. Because of you, we got our bonuses from the past 3 years. Elena, thank you for not staying silent for us." I just smiled and said I had only done what anyone deserved, reclaiming justice. Jeff stood at the end of the hall, hands in pockets, a complicated expression on his face. He stepped forward, hesitant. I knew nothing I said would be enough. But thank you for not letting it continue, and I'm sorry I didn't stand with you sooner. I nodded. I no longer held anger toward him. Jeff was just a part of the machine, lacking the courage to resist. As I packed my few belongings into a small box, some notebooks, a photo frame, a coffee mug, I looked around the office one last time. The walls that had once suffocated me no longer felt intimidating. They were walls, not a prison. I realized what had trapped me wasn't the place. It was fear, silence, and acceptance. I walked out the front door of Northbridge, the cold sunlight cutting through the foggy Seattle sky. My son waited in the parking lot with a red woolen hat. He ran toward me and grabbed my hand tightly. "Mom, done with work?" "Yeah, I'm done." We walked together under the first light snowfall, blending into the glittering streetlights. My shoulders felt light. No more watchful eyes behind me. No more veiled HR threats. No more fear of being pushed out. I didn't know what the future held. The new job would bring challenges. Bills would still need to be paid, and the road ahead would not be easy. But one thing was clear. I had stood firm against a system that wanted me silent. Amid the falling snow and my son's laughter, I realized something deeper than I had ever imagined. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is taking the next step, even when everything around you is trying to make you surrender. The truth can be hidden, distorted, buried, but it cannot be buried forever, and silence, sometimes, is complicity. That night, as we walked through the streets together, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom.